Velvet Nights in downtown L. The bass shook the floor like a slow, dangerous heartbeat. Inside Velvet Room, the city's hottest underground bar, bodies moved like waves under red neon lights. Music pulsed through walls like a lover's whisper, and the smell of sweat, smoke, and desire lingered in the air. At the center of it all, Ava. She didn't dance. She didn't flirt. She didn't need to. She stood at the bar with a glass of bourbon in hand, the ice untouched, her lips deep red and unmoving. Her dress was black silk, backless, barely there, held up by two thin straps in defiance. She didn't smile. She didn't have to. Eyes followed her. Men looked. Women stared. Bartenders poured faster. And yet, Ava felt nothing. Not tonight. Tonight wasn't about being seen. It was about disappearing, at least for a little while. Her phone buzzed once. "Happy birthday. You still alive?" Unknown number. No name. No reply. She downed the bourbon in one slow motion, grabbed her clutch, and walked out. 1:12 a.m. The alley behind Velvet Room rain had started. Just enough to slick the pavement, make heels slip, make dresses cling tighter. Ava didn't care. She moved like she owned the night, confident, distant, untouchable. But the city had other plans. "Hey, baby girl, where you off to this late?" The voice came from the shadows. She turned. Three of them. One leaned against a dumpster, chewing a toothpick. Another had a teardrop tattoo below one eye. The third, big, silent, dangerous, just stared at her like he was already picturing her on the ground. Ava didn't slow her step. She reached into her clutch, feeling for the smooth edge of the pepper spray. And something else, colder. "You don't want to do this," she said, voice calm. The skinny one laughed. "What, you gonna throw your purse at us, sweetheart?" The big one moved first. A hand reached out to grab her arm, and then it all changed. A blur of movement, a crack, a grunt, a scream. In less than 5 seconds, the man was on the ground, wheezing, holding his knee, which now bent the wrong way. The other two turned in time to see him step out of the shadows. Soaking wet, tall, sharp jawline, bloodied knuckles, no expression. Damien. He moved like he wasn't guessing, like he'd done this before, like it was muscle memory. The second guy swung a switchblade. Damien ducked, stepped inside, and drove his elbow into the man's throat. The sound was ugly, wet. The last one ran. Silence fell, broken only by rain. Ava stood still, heart pounding, face unreadable. He turned to her, wiping blood from his hand with his shirt, which did nothing to hide the wound blossoming red along his ribs. "You okay?" he asked. "You're bleeding," she replied. "Better me than you." He staggered slightly, his breath hitched. Still, he stood straight, proud or stupid, she couldn't tell. "You need a hospital," Ava said. Damien shook his head, eyes scanning the alley behind her. "No hospitals, no police, no names." She stared at him. Rain fell harder. "You have anywhere to go?" He didn't answer. She sighed, looked around once, then back at him. "My place is 5 blocks from here, but I'm warning you, I keep a knife under my pillow." He smirked, the first real expression she'd seen on him. "Let's hope it's sharper than your tongue." 1:28 a.m., her apartment, 17th floor. The elevator doors opened with a quiet chime, and Ava stepped out first, Damien following behind. His pace was slow, like he was hiding pain under the cool exterior, but his eyes never wavered from the shadows. Ava noticed the tightness in his jaw, the faint tremor in his hands as he pressed them against his wound. Despite the blood, there was something magnetic about him, something dangerous, but also familiar. Ava led him down the hall, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. The faint smell of lavender and vanilla lingered in the air as she unlocked the door to her apartment, the dim light from inside spilling into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind them, and the silence settled, broken only by the sound of the rain outside. Damien didn't sit down immediately. He stood by the door, surveying the room like he was cataloging every possible exit, every potential threat. His eyes were sharp, scanning the space with unsettling precision. Ava set the bottle of bourbon on the kitchen counter, her fingers brushing over the cool glass. She didn't look at him, but she could feel his gaze on her back, heavy and searching. She wanted to ask him why he'd saved her, why he'd risked his life for a stranger. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she turned and spoke. "You need to lie down." Damien's gaze flickered to her, and for a split second, something in his eyes softened, just enough to catch her breath. "I'll be fine," he said, his voice like gravel, but there was an edge of something more in it, something desperate. Ava moved toward him, her heels clicking with each step. She could feel the tension between them, thick and electric. As she reached him, she grabbed his arm gently, guiding him toward the couch. He didn't fight her, but his body was tense, and she could tell he didn't want her to see how badly he was hurt. When he sat, his breath came out in a low hiss, and for the first time since he entered, Ava noticed how vulnerable he looked, despite the tough exterior, despite the blood. "Let me take a look at your wound," she said, her voice soft but firm. Damien didn't respond, but he watched her closely as she knelt before him. She began to unbutton his shirt carefully, feeling the heat of his skin beneath her fingertips. The room was quiet except for the sound of rain against the windows and the soft rustle of clothing. As she peeled back the fabric, the gash on his side came into view. Deep, jagged, still oozing blood. She frowned, reaching for the first aid kit on the coffee table. "You're going to need stitches," she said, her tone clipped. She opened the kit, and when her hands brushed against his side, Damien's body stiffened. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice low. "I can take care of myself." Ava looked up at him, her fingers hovering over the wound. "You're not the only one with secrets, Damien," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Let me help you." There was a long pause as his eyes held hers. For a moment, neither of them moved, just locked in some unspoken understanding. Then, in one fluid motion, he reached out and cupped her face in his hand. The touch was unexpected, but it sent a rush of heat through her. His thumb brushed gently over her lower lip, and Ava's breath caught in her throat. "I don't need your help," he said again, but his voice was softer, quieter this time. There was something raw in it, something human. Ava's gaze dropped to his hand, still resting against her cheek, and then she took a breath. Her eyes met his again, and this time she didn't look away. "Everyone needs help sometimes," she replied, her voice steady. Damien's gaze flickered to her lips, then back to her eyes. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he released his grip on her face, allowing her to continue tending to his wound. The air between them crackled with tension, and neither of them spoke for several minutes as she carefully cleaned and bandaged his injury. When she finished, Damien leaned back into the couch, his eyes closing for just a moment. The quiet between them felt charged. Ava sat back, watching him, still unsure of who he really was, what he really wanted, what he was running from. "You don't talk much, do you?" she asked, breaking the silence. He opened his eyes, his gaze settling on her once more. There was a brief flash of something, a warning perhaps, before he spoke. "I talk when I need to," he said, "but I don't need to talk to you." Ava tilted her head, her lips curling into a faint smile. "I'm not asking you to," she replied, standing up and walking over to the kitchen counter. She poured them both a glass of bourbon, her back to him. But before she could turn around, his voice came again. "You want to know what I'm running from, don't you?" Damien asked, his voice low and dark. Ava froze, the glass halfway to her lips. She didn't answer, but she didn't need to. "I'll tell you, but not tonight," he continued, his voice distant now. "Tonight, I just need to rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk." She set the glass down slowly. Something told her that Damien wasn't just running from the law. He was running from something much darker, something he wasn't ready to confront. And Ava, for reasons she couldn't explain, was determined to find out what that was. The morning after Ava woke to the cold touch of absence, the space beside her was untouched, the sheets still pressed from where Damien had been moments earlier. The apartment was silent, save for the soft hum of the city outside her window. Her head was heavy, the bourbon from last night still lingering at the edges of her consciousness, but the absence of Damien was more prominent. He was gone. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, and glanced around the room. The pendant was still on the nightstand, just as it had been before. She picked it up carefully, running her fingers over the cool silver. The symbol felt important somehow, familiar, but she couldn't place it. The storm had passed, but her thoughts were still stormy, churning with questions. Why had he come? Why had he stayed long enough to let her tend to his wounds? And why had he left without a word? 10:15 a.m. The same morning, Ava wandered into the kitchen, still wearing her silk nightgown, the fabric clinging to her curves as she moved. The coffee machine hummed in the corner, but her mind wasn't on caffeine. She poured herself a glass of water, her fingers still tingling from the touch of the pendant. She hadn't heard from him. No text, no call, nothing. Her phone buzzed on the counter, breaking her thoughts. Her heart skipped a beat as she grabbed it, hoping to see his name. "I need to talk. 5 p.m. Meet me at the Black Orchid." It was Damien. Ava's breath hitched. The Black Orchid, a private club, exclusive, dangerous. She'd been there once, years ago. She wasn't sure if it was a good idea to go, but she couldn't resist. The message was simple, but the weight of it pressed against her chest. He wanted to talk. She typed a quick reply. "I'll be there." And just like that, the day became a countdown. 5 p.m. The Black Orchid. The club was dark, seductive, filled with low whispers and the hum of hushed conversations. Ava walked in, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor, the heat of the room embracing her as she made her way to the back. Her dress tonight was different, tighter, more form-fitting, the deep red fabric clinging to her body, highlighting every curve. She felt eyes on her, the heat of their gaze following her movements, but she ignored them. She only had one focus tonight, Damien. She found him in a shadowed corner, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He was dressed in black, looking as dangerous as he had the night before. But there was something different in the way he looked at her now, like he was trying to decide whether to pull her closer or push her away. Ava approached slowly, her gaze never leaving his. As she reached him, she stood still for a moment, allowing the tension to build between them. She could feel it, the electricity in the air, the unspoken challenge. "You came," Damien said, his voice low and gravelly. Ava didn't reply immediately. She just took the seat across from him, crossing her legs slowly, the fabric of her dress shifting as she did. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked, her voice steady, but her heart racing. Damien studied her for a moment, his gaze dark and intense. He didn't speak at first, just took a long sip of his drink, his eyes not leaving hers. The tension between them was palpable now, thick with unspoken words and desires neither was ready to voice. "I told you last night," he said finally, "that I don't need help. But I think I might need something else." Ava's pulse quickened at his words. She wasn't sure if he was talking about the wound on his side or something else entirely. "What's that?" she asked, leaning in slightly, her voice softer now. "You," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The simplicity of the words hit her like a shock to the system. She wasn't expecting it, but somehow she knew it was coming. They'd both felt it last night. The heat, the rawness, the danger of it all. It had been inevitable. Ava met his gaze, her breath shallow. Something in her stirred, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Desire. But there was more to it. A craving for something deeper, something dangerous. The air between them shifted, charged with an intensity that left her breathless. Her gaze dropped to his lips, and without thinking, she reached out, her fingers grazing the side of his face, just lightly. Damien's eyes darkened in response, and in a fluid motion, he was beside her. His lips captured hers, a kiss that was hungry, urgent, and all-consuming. Ava's breath caught in her throat as his hands gripped her waist, pulling her closer, his body warm against hers. She could feel the heat of him, the raw power he exuded. And yet, there was a tenderness beneath it, a softness that was just for her. The kiss deepened, the world around them blurring until there was nothing but the two of them, tangled in the quiet madness they'd created. But as the kiss broke, Damien pulled away slightly, his forehead resting against hers. "You don't know what you're getting into," he whispered. Ava didn't care. She was already in. 10 p.m., back at Ava's apartment. The night was still young, but it felt like everything had changed. Damien had left without a word after that kiss, leaving Ava alone with nothing but the echoes of the moments they shared. She wasn't sure what was happening between them, if it was a moment of weakness, a passing attraction, or something more. But the look in his eyes told her that there was something dark lurking beneath the surface. And for the first time in a long while, she wanted to know what it was. She stared at the pendant in her hand again. It felt heavier now, like it was pulling her into a world she wasn't sure she was ready for. But she couldn't turn back.